It was one of those quiet Sunday afternoons in Savannah, Georgia, the kind that wraps you in warmth. The magnolia trees were in bloom, they sent dancing on the breeze as I sat on my porch sipping sweet tea and enjoying the hush of the day. That's when my phone rang. It was my sister. "Amanda, hey," she said, slightly out of breath. "Can you watch Ryan for the weekend? I got pulled into a last-minute trip." "I owe you." I didn't hesitate. "Of course," I said. It had been almost a year since I'd last seen Ryan. Back then, he was still that thoughtful teen, soft-spoken, polite, always helping with the groceries and texting his mom if he'd be late when he arrived that evening. I noticed the change immediately. He was taller, his voice deeper, and he carried himself with a quiet confidence. But his hug still as warm and sincere as ever. "Thanks for having me, Aunt Claire," he said, and I smiled. Some things thankfully hadn't changed that night. We made his favorite spaghetti. We talked about school music and what he'd been watching. Then we settled on the couch for one of those old crime shows we both used to binge. By the time the third episode ended, night had fallen and the house felt still. Then he turned to me and Claire. He said, his tone suddenly serious, "Can I ask you something kind of personal?" I turned off the television and focused entirely on him, saying, "Of course." He fidgeted with his hands and glanced down, saying, "I don't really know who else to talk to. It's kind of embarrassing." "Whatever it is," I replied carefully, "you can tell me." And he did talk to me about school and a girl he liked who didn't seem to notice him. He told me how his friends made fun of him for never dating and how he felt pressured to appear strong when in reality he didn't have it together. I just listened, and then I told him some of my own embarrassing stories that I'd normally never tell. He laughed, and for the first time that night, I felt the tension leave his shoulders. Later, as I was getting the guest room ready, I heard a soft knock. "Aunt Claire," he said, standing in the doorway. "Would it be weird if I stayed in your room tonight? Like when I was younger?" He was almost grown, yet I noticed something familiar in his eyes, a little unsaid longing to feel safe. "Of course, honey." That took me by surprise. I said that he lay on one side of the bed, and I lay on the other, just like in the past. The room was quiet, and I could hear his breathing slowing as sleep took over. It was then that I realized that teenagers like Ryan are under a lot of pressure to be strong and cool so they can always perform, but that very few places give them the chance to just be. The following morning, I made pancakes, and he sat at the counter, looking more relaxed while scrolling through his phone. After we took a stroll around the park, he told me he intended to study marine biology, adding that he had dreamed of seeing the ocean and of doing something that mattered. "Thanks for last night," he added gently. "Anytime," I answered, meaning it. I felt a modest surge of pride. Sunday flew by, and when Amanda arrived, she was thankful but exhausted. She gave me a hug and tousled Ryan's hair. "How was your weekend?" After they departed, I returned to the porch to allow the weekend's memories to settle in. Ryan shrugged, saying it was nice that Aunt Claire was cool. Just an honest relationship without any major events or spectacular discoveries. A young man, opened up, and an adult who happened to be there, listened to him ever since. Ryan still calls occasionally, and every time he does, I remember how much that weekend meant to both him and me. Weeks went by, and life resumed its normal routine. But occasionally, I would look past the couch where we sat, or at the guest room, and think of Ryan. Not the bashful boy I used to watch as the young man developing into something more than one. One evening, my phone buzzed. "Aunt Claire, you got a minute?" And we spent more than an hour talking. He told me about a marine science club he was considering joining, something he never would have dared try. Before he spoke about a new teacher who believed in him, and even a girl he'd started texting. Nothing serious, but enough to make him smile when he said her name. And as we talked, I realized this had become our new normal. These small, consistent check-ins, these quiet windows where I got to witness someone stepping into their future, and something changed in me too. I started noticing teenagers more, especially the quiet ones at the grocery store, at church. I started volunteering at a local youth center once a month. Nothing huge, just helping with college prep, organizing workshops, or sometimes just being someone who listens. Not all of them opened up, but some did, and each time, I thought of Ryan Dodd. Then one afternoon, months later, he called again, but this time his voice was shaking. "I messed up," he said. He told me about a blowout with Amanda, about pressure grades, curfews. He'd slammed a door, said things he didn't mean, and now he didn't feel like himself. "Everyone acts like I'm supposed to have it all together," he said, "like I'm not allowed to mess up." When he eventually stopped talking, I said, Ryan, growing up isn't about being perfect. It's about learning how to recover when you're not. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is admit you're struggling. I didn't interrupt him or suggest answers. I simply listened. After a moment of stillness, someone said, "Thanks, Aunt Claire. I needed to hear that." Amanda emailed me later that evening, saying, "Thanks for talking to him. He really listens to you." I told her the truth. I'm just someone who answers the phone when it rings. By the time Ryan graduated from high school, he had been accepted into a university with a prestigious marine biology program. He sent me a screenshot of the acceptance email with the single line, "I made it. You were right. I found my ocean." That summer before he moved out of state, we had dinner on the porch one last time, and even though he looked older and more grounded, the light in his eyes remained the same. "Do you remember that weekend?" He laughed. "You mean when I asked to sleep in your bed at 17? I remember more than that." He said that I remember feeling like I wasn't crazy for feeling the way I did. "You've always mattered," I told him. Years later, he is in his last year of college, has traveled, interned with environmental organizations, and even mentors younger students who make him feel like himself. He still contacts me. Whenever I get asked to do a small favor, no matter how small, I pause and consider this might be the beginning of something I'll never forget, because sometimes all it takes is a weekend, an open heart, and the courage to say yes. Aunt Claire, with that same warmth in his voice, says, "What if Amanda hadn't called that Sunday? What if I'd said I was too busy? I would have missed everything. I would have missed being someone he could trust."